All right, good morning. It is Friday today. We usually do these on Thursday, but today we're doing Friday. So hope you're having a fantastic Friday. This is Coach Daryl Johnson, your West Coast Harvest Coach. And I appreciate you taking your time to join me today. We're going to go over three topics: one mind, one body, one business related, like we normally do. And I actually had a different topic in mind for the mind section, but I'm going to go over this. I'm going to change gears a little bit and go over the media perception kind of angle because it's very relevant and obviously it's a big deal for all of us. And if you're at all aware of what's happening in the world, the mainstream media, or the term I prefer, legacy media, is rife with misinformation, disinformation, redirection, bias, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really lost a ton of credibility. In fact, I have a chart here. Let me see if I can pull this up. This chart kind of gives you an idea of how much faith the people have in the media institutions over the last 20 years or so. This doesn't even count the last 2 years, which has been absolutely bonkers. It wasn't even great in 2000. We're talking 38% thought, we had a lot of confidence in those sources, and now we're down to, the teens. And it should come as no surprise. And anybody who follows politics or news or just current events, this is easy to see. Now, you could be like, "Oh, this is terrible. How do we find our information? People are always lying to us." There's a silver lining in this, and the silver lining is the decentralization of information is what the legacy media decries. Is like, "Oh, there's people on YouTube and doing podcasts, and they can speak whatever they want to say, and they're not even journalists." I would challenge that. I would challenge the assertion that anybody that works in legacy media is actually a journalist and not an advocate or an activist. When the news becomes a for-profit machine, and it has, whether on the right or the left, then you no longer have pure journalism as your goal. The goal is not to bring information forth to the population and let them see the truth. The goal is now, we have an agenda we must move forward with, and we will only do things that support our agenda. And if something comes up that doesn't support our agenda, it's either marginalized, it's made fun of, or it's simply not talked about at all. So this is how it's gone. And the problem with, so let's back up a little bit. Let's say you are working for a legacy media company and you report a story and it ends up being wrong, either because the facts you got were wrong, your sources were wrong or misleading, or you simply were chasing a bias and then realized later that your story didn't match the bias. Well, what people would expect you to do would be like, "Hey, you know what? We got this wrong. We apologize for giving you bad information. Here's the correction. Thank you for trusting us. We want to make it right." That's what should happen. But that's not what happens. What usually happens is a doubling down on the initial angle, and then seeking blame everywhere else but themselves for why things didn't happen the way they said they were supposed to, or the way they said they did. And this is one of the big problems why people don't trust. I mean, it's not rocket science, folks. If you have a buddy of yours who constantly gets things wrong, either intentionally or accidentally, but never owns up to his goofs or apologizes in earnest for the misdeeds, you're not going to have a lot of faith in the individual. You might be fond of him. Maybe he plays a really good game of golf, but you're not going to have a lot of faith in what he says or does. And this is where the mainstream legacy media has come into. Now, the decentralization of information is again a double-edged sword. You have kooks and nuts on both sides of the spectrum, all over the place. You have people who think the Earth is flat, and then people who think that everything is a government conspiracy. And I gotta be honest with you guys. Although there's a lot of government stuff going on that's shifty, people have way too much faith in the government to be able to pull off something in secret and with coordination. I think a lot of the conspiracy stuff is just accidental benefit for powers that be. I mean, there are definitely some conspiracies out there. Don't get me wrong, but the government doesn't have its act together enough to pull off all these different conspiracies intentionally. Anyway, so you have things like YouTube, and you have alternate outlets like you have Facebook and you have Instagram, and obviously there is an issue with even these outlets having agendas, and they often, the big tech, the Googles, the Facebooks, you know, remember Google and Facebook own like everything. Instagram is owned by Facebook, and Google owns so much stuff. So these big tech companies are often very much in league with the legacy media. It's now, I don't know. I'm not an expert in these matters, but I'm a relatively intelligent individual. I put together. I don't know if they actually sit down in the boardroom and discuss with big tech and media, legacy media, and go, all right, guys, here's how we're going to spin this story. This is the angle we want to go with. Or if maybe they're just all so similar, they just all kind of want to see things the same. So obviously in the last 2 years, almost to the day, in fact, today's March 11th. I believe our first lockdown here in California was March 14th of 2020. So basically 2 years. It has been nuts. What the legacy media has really wanted to push forward the agenda. And there's nothing wrong with having an agenda. I don't really have a problem with that because everybody does. We all do. We all have bias. The challenge is when you are strong enough where you don't let anybody else have a say, or I should say you attempt to do that. And the problem that brings is, well, first of all, if you're often wrong, as legacy media and big tech has been, then it looks like you are maliciously hiding information. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Who's to say? I'm sure it all will come out in the end. But nothing. If your goal is to get the truth out there, nothing will bring out and expose bad information more than the light, bringing it out, let it come to light. And you have to give people the benefit of the doubt that they are smart enough to figure out the difference between good information, bad information, and everything in between, despite their biases and despite their upbringing or whatever. But if you are literally suppressing information, then it makes people want to know even more about it. I mean, that's just human nature. So the reason I bring this up in the mind section is it can be very depressing. It's a very, if you are, for two reasons. One is if the legacy media is only promoting bad news or news that is designed to scare you, because that's what gets you to click on their website or go to their channel because, oh my gosh, something scary is happening. Let me find out what's going on. Or they are basically browbeating you into a certain path that maybe is not aligned with your values. They can cause depression. It can cause anxiety, or exacerbate these issues if you have them. So it's silly that, well, silly maybe that's not right. It's insidious, in my opinion, how this has been working for the last several years. And this isn't the last 2 years. This has been the last, I would say, last 20, like the chart showed. And ever since, I would say the cable news, and I use that term loosely because I realize most of it's internet now, but the CNNs, the Fox News, the MSNBCs, the digital versions of the old school newspapers has really become the go-to source for information. There's been a lot of alignment of the agendas. The good news is with the Spotify and the YouTube and the Facebook and you have Rumble and Parler. There's so many platforms, which I think is really, really good. Is now information is actually out there if you want to find it. In the past, if you were curious about a controversial point of view on something, you had to dig it up. You had to really look hard to find it. Now, it's not that hard. And the cool thing for me is if there's something controversial, well, people are really upset about this topic. I wonder why it's so, controversial. Well, now you can look it up and you can hear from people who are proponents of this side of the argument, and you can make a decision well, this guy sounds like a nut, so maybe this isn't something I care about, or well, this person has some legit credentials. Maybe they have information that's valuable, but you now have the opportunity to make the decision. So my point of this little section is to find the shining star of of hope in that decentralization of information, video, print, whatever, is allowing people to actually get more of the picture, not all of it. And let me give another example. As I'm shooting this video, the world is embroiled in a serious conflict, and I say the world because it affects us all, between Russia and the Ukraine, or is it Ukraine? I'm not always. I was confused on how they actually label the country. Whatever. The point being is, one side would have you believe that the Ukrainians are white supremacist Nazis that are trying to build biological weapons and trying to Okay, that's what one side says. The other side says the Ukrainians are heaven sent angels and they've done nothing to provoke or annoy Russia. Now, anybody with an IQ above room temperature can probably figure out that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Now, you may have your opinions on what's right or wrong. I know I certainly do, and how these conflicts should be resolved. But regardless, you can't just accept. Here's the ironic thing for me. So many people over the last 2 years have gained a legitimate, massive distrust of legacy media because they've been wrong. They've had a clear agenda on what stories they wanted to tell and what direction they wanted to push population. So it's been very, very obvious to almost everybody that they have been skewed. Yet, suddenly, people want to just accept what they hear on the legacy media channels. I would just be very careful about that. Is it all false? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, remember, for 2 years, the legacy media has pushed a solid agenda, despite being incorrect and proven less than ethical on lots of things. So that same media is now telling you a story about this conflict. I just want you to open your eyes and ears and be aware that, guys, these conflicts are never black and white. We would love to believe that the world is split into good and evil, like it's a science fiction movie with bad robots and good robots. It doesn't work that way, folks. There are always shades of gray in there, and so it's important to get the whole story, in my opinion. Industries that are having agendas pushing down your throat. Look farther, look deeper. All right, let's move on to our next topic of the body. Now, this is an important topic for me personally. Now, I don't know about you, but I know I have suffered over the years with insomnia, sometimes for a day or two, sometimes for weeks or months. And I don't think I have to tell you that sleep is important. We'll go back to this chart in just a moment. And so we talk a lot about, with body, like, exercise and nutrition. Those are really important. And everybody wants to look good. Everybody wants to feel good. But I can't emphasize to you enough how important quality sleep is. Again, being somebody who's experienced bouts of sleeplessness and times of very restful sleep, man, the difference is well, no pun intended, night and day. If I have a session of insomnia where I go maybe a week or two and only get a couple hours sleep a night, and then all of a sudden I sleep 2 or 3 nights in a row, wow, I almost feel like I've been reborn. It's really, really that important. So let's go back to this chart. Now I want to go over a few of these topics. So why is it important? Obviously, repair your body, improve learning. These are things. This isn't probably something you've never heard before. Maintain your immune system. That's kind of a big deal. There's a bit of a typo on growth there. How can you sleep better? Now, this is important. I think because a lot of people screw this up. You want to habituate your body to waking up and going to bed at about the same time every day, and that even includes on weekends. And your rhythm of your body will be developed by how well you do this. Exercise. Oh, another typo. Exercise regularly. Yeah, that's really important. Not just for fitness, but your body has to. Your body is a machine, and it needs to be maintained, and it needs to be dealt with appropriately. Avoid big meals before bed. Keep your bed. Oh, this is let me talk about this bedroom thing for a minute. So turn off the computer, phone, television. Keep your bedroom cool, dark, and quiet. And I remember years ago I read. I don't know, maybe I watched a video about the bedroom should basically just be literally for bed activities, sleep, marital type activities. If you get in the habit of watching TV in your bed or you're on your phone, and again, I think we're all guilty of this, especially now that our phone is right here and it leads us to the outside world. It overstimulates your brain. It really makes it hard for your brain to kind of dial down. So I would I've never had a TV in my bedroom. I've never had, you know, I've never watched TV in the room. I don't watch a lot of TV anyway. But for me, I just never have, and it was not hard because TVs are cheap and they're not that hard to put up on a wall or whatever. So that's important. And I want to go back to the chart again for a minute. So if you don't have enough sleep, okay, on the right hand of this chart, and cause anxiety, depression, other mental health problems. This is important. I mean, it doesn't cause them, but it causes them to increase. Irritability and mood swings. So I can test for that for sure. More typos. I gotta source my charts a little better, or make them myself. Cause headaches, weight gain, and poor vision. Now this is a little weird. It does not cause weight gain. I've talked about this in the fitness stuff, in my fitness stuff for years. Weight gain only happens when you consume more food than you use. What they mean is lack of sleep will mess up your hormones as far as how body fat is stored, how appetite is triggered. So those disruptions will cause problems. It'll interfere with how much lean tissue you can put on, what that means is if you eat, let's say your body maintenance is 2,400 calories, whatever it is. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if you eat a surplus, let's say you eat 2,600 calories, well, whether or not that surplus will be stored as body fat or lean tissue depends a lot on your hormonal structure. If you're in what's called an anabolic state where you build lean tissue, or a catabolic state where it's broken down, and if you're not getting enough exercise, obviously that will be stored as body fat. So it's a very important thing. And again, I don't want to harp on this because I think everybody kind of knows this, but I really want to emphasize, again, I've gone through times in my life where I've had not enough sleep. I can tell you it makes you feel like crap. Your energy level's off. Your brain power is down. Your focus is not there. And if it's a chronic problem, you may not even realize how bad off you are until, like I say, you get a couple nights of sleep and like, wow, I feel like a new person. I feel like my IQ went up by 25 points. Maybe it did. I don't have a study on that, but I suspect that your mental acuity is definitely impacted by how much and the quality of sleep you get. All right, so that's kind of the sleep thing. I don't beat a dead horse. Make sure you get it done. Make it a priority. Make getting your good quality sleep as important as eating good quality food and as important as getting regular exercise. It really matters that much. So getting good quality sleep, massively important. Let's see. All right, moving on to our third topic. This is the one I kind of tease a little bit. So we'll talk about sunk cost and sunk cost fallacy. Now, this is interesting to me because this concept applies to business, obviously. We talk of dollars and cents, but it applies to interpersonal relationships as well. So here's what a sunk cost is. A sunk cost is an expense that you are going to make in a business that you aren't necessarily going to recoup. You buy a printer, you buy a manufacturing machine, you buy something that it's paid. You pay for it, and it's just done. It's over and done. You won't necessarily. It's not like marketing where I spend $1,000 on marketing, I'm going to get $1,500 back, or I spend $500 on these parts, and I'm going to convert that into $1,000 of merchandise. A sunk cost it's like one and done. You're not going to recover it directly. It kind of factors into the overhead a little bit. And the sunk cost fallacy, and this is very, very dangerous. And I have fallen for this myself. It is that once you have this money spent, so let's say you spend $100,000 putting equipment into a business to start up making stuff, and you're like, and you're running the business for 2 years. You're making a profit. Let's say you profit $20,000 a year. Well, I mean, you start getting stressed, and you're like, this isn't enough. We can't. Or let's say you don't make a profit at all. Let's say you break even, and you're like, as an outside perspective, you'd be like, well, this business is not being successful. It should be either revamped or shut down because it's not producing profit. But you're like, but I can't because I spent $100,000 building it out. And I have to get that money back. And gosh, if it's not making money, if you're not making profit, you got to let it go. And I'll tell you a personal story. So I remember the first martial arts school that I ended up having of my own. I looked for spots to open up like at a rec center or do a part-time thing. Because I was at the time when I left teaching full-time, I went to personal training full-time, and I planned to open a part-time martial arts facility and kind of ease back into that business. So I ended up having a friend of mine who had opened a martial arts school, and it was not being successful. It was not generating profit. It was actually losing money. So she was actually looking to unload it, if you will. And we taught a very similar same family of martial arts, so it was a pretty easy transition. So when I first talked to her about it, and this is at the advice of my business mentor, he's like, "Hey, you should approach so and so." Asked to basically take over her school and buy it from her so she can get out of it, and you can now have a place where you can start, because I going full time. When I first approached her about it, well, the first time she was kind of offended that I would think she's not succeeding when it was obvious she wasn't. But then she came back to the table, and she's like, "Okay, well," she presents this plan to me. She's like, "Well, I've spent this much money in build out, this much money in equipment, this much money, for XYZ, and so I want that money back." And I'm like, wait a minute. I go, "Right now, your business is losing money." I go, I'm kind of doing you a favor by even offering to pay you for it. I could have just wait until it goes out of business and come in and get all this stuff for pennies on the dollar. But, so she was guilty of the sunk cost fallacy. She's like, "Well, I spent $45,000 getting it to where it is, even though it's not even close to being profitable. So I want to recoup all that money to move forward." And that's not a reasonable position to come from. And now let me explain how this works in everyday life, although you can probably draw the conclusion. Let's say you're in a relationship, I don't know, with a guy, with a woman, whatever flavor floats your boat, and you're realizing that, this relationship is not working, we're not meeting each other's needs, we're constantly at odds. She wants to go this way, I want to go this way. It's just, it's not working out, and it becomes very obvious that the future for this relationship is very bleak. And if you pursue a continuation, it's just going to be a lot of anxiety and stress. But then you think, "Well, yeah, but we've been together for 5 years. I can't let that 5 years go for nothing." My friends, that is a sunk cost fallacy. The time you've spent building a relationship does not register in the future promise of how well that's going to work out. That investment in time is a sunk cost. You spent that time, you spent that money, you took those trips, you bought the flowers, you bought, whatever. That money, that time, that emotional investment is a sunk cost. You need to look at the point you are right now and say, okay, from this point forward, is this relationship, whether it's a business partnership, whether it's a P&L statement, or whether it's a romantic relationship, is this relationship moving forward doing for me what I wanted to do? And are all parties benefiting? If the answer is no, it needs to be either revamped or terminated. The sunk cost, the money, the time, the investment you've already put into it does not matter. What matters is how it's going to work from this point forward. Okay? So, and that's a bitter pill to swallow sometimes. And again, I'm speaking from experience on both sides, professionally and personally. Definitely I put money and energy and investment into relationships to have it go nowhere, and then you get kind of like pissed off, like, "Well, I can't believe I spent all this time and money and blah blah blah, and this person doesn't appreciate." You know what? Let it go. It's a sunk cost, and hanging on to it is only going to make your future suck. So, if it's a business that is absolutely bombing and failing, no matter how much love and passion and tears you put into it, you have to either look at redoing it or taking it out behind the shed and shooting it in the head, to use a country euphemism. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. So today reviewed, the mindset part was getting clarity on the media's biases and agendas, using the benefit of decentralized information to get a better picture, good for your mental health, as well as getting the truth. We talked about the importance of getting sleep for your body and your mind. Super, super important. Again, I can't emphasize it enough. I know it's cliche, everybody's heard it, yada, yada, yada. I'm telling you, it's true. And then we talked on the business side about the sunk cost and the sunk cost fallacy. and how it's important is that this is now, but back up, the sunk cost concept is why it's really good to get an outside mentor or appraiser on the situation, because they aren't going to have the emotional investment and the financial ties that you have if your business venture is not succeeding. And again, they may have ideas and go, hey, well, it's not making money right now, or you're not hitting your goals now, but if you do a few things, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can probably be successful. So that's how it works. You are probably not the best person to make that decision because you're going to have an emotional investment, most likely. I know entrepreneurs that are strictly numbers folks. They buy into a business and they have no problem pulling the plug if it's not doing what they want. And I think in the business world, that's probably a safer way to go, is to really let the numbers dictate the direction of the business. And that's hard if you're doing a passion of love, like, I love selling flowers and making flower arrangements, and I love building, custom birdhouses, and that's great. But and again, if your business isn't profitable, you might consider relegating it to a side hustle or a hobby. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to make a business your vocation and pay your bills and your retirement, it has to be profitable. And again, if it's not, the money and time investment, emotional love that you put into it from that point behind you does not matter. What matters is how it's going to do in the future. All right. Thanks for listening to me this morning. Hope you guys have a fantastic, it's Friday, but I don't know what day you're listening to this. Wish you well, and I will catch you on the next one. Maybe.